Today overall, still though, the odd shower around to contend with. Temperatures reasonably similar to today as well, generally 11 to 12 degrees Celsius. That mild, slightly unsettled theme does continue throughout Tuesday and Wednesday, but a few sunnier spells again emerging into Thursday, our temperatures also dipping. Bye-bye.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You could be joining the Great British Giveaway list of winners with your chance to grab a fantastic £50,000 in tax-free cash.
My name is Cliff.
And my name is Julie, and we won 25,000. I'd say don't hesitate, do it. If you're not in it, you've got no chance of winning it.
For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Good morning and a happy third Sunday of Advent. In the Pickwick Papers, Charles Dickens described Christmas as the season of hospitality, merriment and open-heartedness. Dear viewers, you are certainly welcome to Sunday with Michael Portillo, and you may rely on 2 hours of open-heartedness as we discuss politics and ethics, and some merriment as we turn to arts and food. The Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner, is determined to build 1.5 million homes during this 5-year Parliament. Is it true that the Tories are quietly cheering her on, since they supposedly believe in a property-owning democracy, but were held back during their period in office by Conservative members of Parliament opposing development in their constituencies? My panel will discuss. The fall of Bashar al-Assad in Syria is already having repercussions in Britain after this country suspended asylum claims from the country. And blatant disagreement between cabinet ministers has emerged over the parliamentary vote in 2013 on military action against the Syrian regime. Security journalist Lizzie Dearden will be here to unpick the situation and to discuss her new book, Plotters, the UK terrorists who failed. Donald Trump is set to re-enter the White House in January. Ellie Hargreaves will join me to offer analysis of the Trump political dynasty, a family which supposedly models itself on the Kennedys. And it's been another busy week for Stefan Kyriazis, who's been out and about in the West End. He'll join me to reflect on the theatrical highlights and lows of this week. But before all of that, let's get the latest news headlines with Sam Francis.
Michael, thank you, and good morning to you. It's just after 11 o'clock. Well, the top story this morning, Labour has claimed a record pace for removing migrants from the UK. But Channel crossings are still at an all-time high. The Home Office says nearly 13,500 people have been removed since Labour's election win in July. That is the most in any six-month period since 2019. However, the number of Channel crossings continues to rise, with over 21,000 migrants arriving by small boat, including a record 609 on Thursday alone. Well, the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, says Labour is intensifying border security and cracking down on illegal working. But the leader of the Conservatives, Kemi Badenoch, says it's Labour who are failing to control our borders.
I'm not going to run away from the subject of immigration. I never have. Labour are pretending that they're tough on immigration when actually they stopped us from doing quite a lot of things. It wasn't just the fact that we had a majority in the Commons. We did not have a majority in the Lords. So a lot of legislation, the Rwanda legislation, even when we were putting it through, it was getting blocked elsewhere. So I'm not going to have Keir Starmer, who wanted foreign criminals to stay in this country, actively stop them from being deported, pretend that he is Mr. Immigration.
Reform UK says it is ready to name an alleged Chinese spy linked to Prince Andrew, defying a court order to keep his identity secret. Nigel Farage and senior MPs are urging his name to be revealed in Parliament, calling it a matter of public interest. The businessman, known as H6, was banned from the UK in 2023 after being deemed a national security threat by the then Home Secretary Suella Braverman. It's claimed H6 met former Prime Ministers David Cameron and Theresa May and kept photos of their meetings in his London office. Well, the Duke of York says he has cut ties with the individual after government concerns were raised. A woman in her 40s has been killed in what police are describing as a shocking and a horrific shooting in Brent overnight. Two men were also injured. One is in a critical condition in hospital, while the other did manage to escape with non-life-threatening injuries. Police were called to the scene just after 9:15 last night, but despite their efforts, the woman sadly died at the scene. No arrests have been made so far, and detectives are now urgently appealing for any witnesses to help track down those behind the attack. 8 people have been injured in Glasgow after a double-decker bus collided with a railway bridge there. Footage shows the vehicle wedged under the bridge on Cook Street, with part of its roof ripped off. One person is still in a critical condition. 5 others were also rushed to hospital. Emergency services were called to the scene of that crash at around 6 o'clock last night, with police now launching an immediate investigation. Roads were closed and motorists are being urged to avoid the area as inquiries continue. Water bills are set to rise by 20% to fix Britain's broken sewage system, adding around £100 to the average household bill over 5 years. Environment Secretary Steve Reed has admitted those hikes will anger families, he says, but that they're essential to repair years of neglect and prevent water rationing within 15 years. The regulator Ofwat is expected to approve those increases this week, with some providers pushing for even steeper rises of up to 84%. Labour, though, says the extra money will be ring-fenced for fixing pipes and building reservoirs, with any unused funds returned to customers. New laws are also being introduced to force water bosses to report sewage leaks, with tougher penalties for non-compliance. Those are the latest headlines for now. I'll be back with you in an hour. Now, though, it's back over to Michael.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much, Sam. A key to Margaret Thatcher's success was boosting the property-owning democracy. It was assumed that homeowners were more likely to be Tory and to breed Conservative voters for future elections. Britain used to have one of the highest rates of home ownership, but the proportion has sunk. And many young voters now see little hope of stepping onto the ownership ladder. With annual immigrants vastly outnumbering the number of new homes, prices and rents are forced up. Labour evidently knows that more houses must be built. And if that means restricting objections to local development, known as NIMBYism, and piling pressure onto developers, shouldn't the Conservatives be cheering on the government? I'm joined now by my panel, pollster and director at JL Partners, Scarlett Maguire, chief political correspondent at The Times, Aubrey Allegretti, and journalist and broadcaster Candice Holsworth. Very good to see you all back on GB News. Candice, are you cheering on the government?
I am. I mean, I don't share the same politics as Angela Rayner. I think we're quite different. But I think what she's doing is good. And I think it's long overdue now. I mean, people are sort of pointing towards NIMBYs and she's sort of overriding their concerns. Probably the problems go a lot deeper than that and they're more complex. You know, as a lot of people in the house building industry have said, listen, we're not necessarily able to ramp up demand in the ways that you're doing. But I think that it's so good that they're changing the conversation on this and they're saying, listen, we're going to set ambitious targets. Maybe they won't be able to meet them. There's practical concerns, but I'm glad that they're doing it.
Scarlett, you're a pollster. Is there polling evidence on what people think on this issue?
Oh, there's plenty of that, yeah. And even though the Conservatives might have been traditionally the party of homeowners, their voters are also more likely to oppose sort of building in local areas and nationally too. But it's the local areas which is the real kicker because that's what then holds up planning and that's what the Labour government indeed are trying to reform. The problem is with that is that there is slight opposition or at least there's less support for the government being able to override local concerns. And I think you can probably appreciate why that might be the case. And so I think this has been a perennial problem for politicians, especially in a parliamentary system, because even though people might support the idea of building lots more homes across the country, they do not necessarily support it in their own backyard. And I think you can see sometimes that might be for legitimate reasons. People are concerned that they won't have the amenities to go with them, the infrastructure might not be able to keep up, and also they might be incredibly ugly. I think there's a lot of work to do to reassure people that that won't be the case. And then, of course, this is the problem. This is something the Conservative government found when they were in power. MPs start getting jittery because they see their local constituencies don't like it. Labour's already on the back foot in their sort of 100 or so rural constituencies thanks to things like the farmers' tax. So I think it could be the sort of thing which tests MPs' loyalty to the party once they start feeling the pressure locally.
Aubrey, is Labour onto a good thing or a bad thing, electorally speaking?
Well, I think that there is a broader concern that too few people have a stake in society and that home ownership is a way to bring people together in that manner, to give them some capital, something to feel proud of, something to nurture and be part of a community. And so I think electorally, they're probably on the smart money. We could see that the sort of younger voters were draining away from the Conservatives. And when we say younger voters, we probably used to mean under 35, but now what we really mean is under 50. And so this is absolutely the sort of thing that if Labour can get right now, then they will, hopefully, they will think, sort of guarantee dividends in the future from people who say, I was locked out, I wasn't given a space in society, now I have a stake and a house, and I'm able to have a family. And all of those things sort of are interlinked and flow from one another. So I think starting now, we're not going to see the benefits or the dividends of it for 5 to 10 years, though.
Candice, inevitably we come to the subject of immigration when we discuss housing. As I said, the number of immigrants at the moment, net migrants, easily outstrips the number of new houses. Of course, you might have more than one person in a house, so it's not a direct comparison. But immigration is the great phantom hanging over the housing issue, is it not?
Yeah, this is it. So this is what a lot of people are saying as well. I mean, you've had a huge growth in population, but not necessarily a match in infrastructure. And, I've heard this from people working on the NHS, for instance, who say that, they've seen a huge increase in the number of patients, but no new doctors have been hired or no new equipment, and it's put massive, massive pressure on them, and they've had to do so much more with so much less. So I think that is something that definitely needs to be looked at. I know both, all parties now, very interestingly, are talking about immigration caps, which is not something that's ever really been discussed before, but that seems to be the new common ground. So maybe that is one facet that needs to be looked at, absolutely. For me, though, I think ultimately you have to be increasing the supply. The supply needs to... That's the big thing that you need to be focusing on. I think when you look at any big period of economic growth in British history, the mid-century, the 19th century, it was always a big increase in the supply of houses, where young people were particularly.
Scarlett, let's not kid ourselves. I mean, even if this 1.5 million homes were built, it's very uncertain what kind of difference that would make. Patrick Flynn is pointing out in The Spectator at the moment that actually no government wants house prices to go down because that's where the nation's wealth is stored, in their homes. 1.5 million homes over 5 years is not going to make much difference to house prices, is it?
I'm not sure about that. That's definitely not my expertise. I mean, I wouldn't have thought it could potentially stop it all getting a lot worse. And I do think that house building planning reform, I think, as Aubrey was talking about, is something that when you look at the gradation of voters, younger voters certainly care a lot more passionately about. I do think, actually, it's something that Labour need to think about, not just the Conservatives, this appeal to younger voters, because they're increasingly turning away from mainstream parties altogether and don't think they're doing anything to represent them. But whether it will make anything better, I think that's part of the reason why Labour need to move very quickly and even move fast and sort of break things to do it, because their whole agenda hinges on being able to achieve this planning reform, not just for house building and to demonstrate that they can start getting younger generations on the housing ladder more easily, but also for crucial infrastructure, for things like data centres, for everything else it's impossibly hard to build in this country. But I think they're on shaker territory than they expected to be going into the next election after 5 years, which means that, yes, Aubrey's right, I think this will take a long time to filter through, but that's why they're going to have to start even quicker to try and get it done.
Aubrey, given the tone of this discussion, the Conservatives ought to get on board with the Labour government. That's what it sounds like. I think the Tory response so far has been to say, yes, we need more homes, but the government is building them in the wrong places. So, in other words, it's quibbling about the detail. But would you say that the Tories do need to, stand up and make it clear that they too would take quite radical measures to get homes built?
I think there would certainly be a benefit to that, and it is one of the easiest ways of unlocking the sort of economic growth which has seemingly dogged the country for many, many years now. Now, obviously, the Conservatives' rebuttal to sort of points about house building is, as we've heard about, they want to see the infrastructure alongside it. They want to see the roads built. They want to see the schools built as well. And those are costly projects, and they come with human costs as well, being able to staff them properly. So that's where the government is in a bit more of a bind. And I think where it's obviously going to go is there is a bit of a dispute currently between departments about where you have, for example, environmental regulation. And there's, I think, about 80,000 new homes that have been blocked recently because of, we've heard, the sort of great crested newt, the things that Keir Starmer has promised to sort of take an axe to. So how willing they are to sort of face down environmental campaigners and say, what's more important here is getting people into homes and as quickly as possible, we'll have to see. The other thing to add is that Labour councils are not universally in support of this. It might be something that's popular amongst Labour MPs and maybe even some Conservative MPs, but Labour councils will have to help deliver this as well. And there seem to be dozens of them in cities and in urban areas, outside urban areas as well, who are very recalcitrant and say this is not deliverable at this scale, and we have already seen our targets rise beyond what we think they should be.
Starmer takes the axe to the great crested newt. You've heard it. You heard it here on GB News. Just, Candice, very briefly, wind turbines and solar panels. Are you as keen to see them as you are keen to see houses?
No. I'm such a pragmatist. Every time I come on your show, I'm always like that. My trade-off would always be more houses. I would always go for that. But like you say, like Scarlett mentioned, beautiful houses, not just concrete, with beautiful gardens, with lovely common areas. These are the things that make people happy and contribute to well-being and flourishing, and we know that.
Scarlett, polling evidence on wind turbines and solar panels, are they going to be welcomed?
They're broadly popular, again, more popular nationally than they are locally, because that's something you're going to find time and time again. But and again, on offshore, more popular than onshore when you're talking about wind turbines. But broadly speaking, they are pretty popular. And I always found it slightly bemusing that more wasn't done to drive for it if we are going to work towards these net zero 2050 targets.
Aubrey, the numbers of turbines and solar panels being talked about, it's a huge number, a huge area. Will they remain as popular as Scarlett has just mentioned, do you think?
Well, there is an interesting conversation going on in government right now about what are called national major infrastructure projects. Projects of national significance. And it was supposed to be a process that would speed up the delivery of big projects so they didn't get clogged up in the local authority system. And so far, it's actually had the reverse effect. So there are going to be attempts to sort of unblock the system and therefore make it more easy for these types of projects to be produced at scale. So I think we'll understand quite quickly just how long the public's willing to wear that.
Very interesting discussion. Scarlett Maguire, Aubrey Allegretti, Candice Holdsworth. They'll all be back later to talk about the Elgin Marbles. Coming up now, Home Affairs and Security journalist Lizzie Dearden will come on to contextualise recent events in Syria and to talk about her book Plotters, the UK terrorists who failed. This is Sunday with Michael Portillo, only on GB News.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family. Simply go to gbnews.com/your say.
Headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight, every night from 11 p.m.
This is Miss Universe fans hailing the end of wokeness and crediting the Trump effect after a biological woman, there's still some of them around apparently, has won the 2024 crown. She's Miss Denmark, because obviously the last decade, you know, it's just been obese transgender smurfs from Papua New Guinea. They're the only people allowed to win any beauty contest, you know what I mean? You're not allowed to have any.
There's some of the trans women have won these. You definitely wouldn't say no.
They
look amazing.
I've seen but I've seen some of them that didn't, and some that were clearly just there out of
Have there been more than one trans woman? I didn't realise this.
Yeah.
Okay,
I've got a chart at home. This one isn't trans. Victoria Kjær-Thielvig, 21 of Denmark. Everything about that description says attractive.
Nazis. Okay, yes. I have seen pictures of her. She is very attractive.
Yes.
She is.
Yes.
I don't know exactly how to put it, but she is kind of not retro or vintage or so. She's quite an old-fashioned notion of beauty, like just absolutely ice blue eyes.
No penis.
Absolutely extraordinary. Clear skin and gorgeous blonde hair. I mean, it's absolutely kind of mid-70s, beauty.
Well, apparently the sanity's returned to the beauty pageant industry, so they can get back to, sexualising 4-year-olds and promoting anorexia like they used to. So
there is that,
She will earn an estimated $250,000 annual salary working full-time as Miss Universe, and will live in a luxurious New York City apartment as she carries out her duties, which involve glass coffee tables and rich Saudi businessmen.
Glass coffee tables. And visiting other planets and solar systems and constellations, I would imagine, of Miss Universe.
Being concerned about animals.
Yes, absolutely, and wanting to bring about world peace. I miss those days.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, you didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+ and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. The fall of Bashar al-Assad in Syria may seem remote from Britain, but last week the government paused asylum decisions from that country. And a row has emerged between cabinet ministers, notably Pat McFadden and Wes Streeting on one side and Ed Miliband on the other, about the parliamentary vote that took place back in 2013 on military action in Syria. Joining me now is the Home Affairs and Security journalist Lizzie Dearden to unpick what's been happening and also discuss her new book, which is called Plotters, the UK Terrorists Who Failed. Lizzie, very good to see you. How would you describe the connection between events in Syria and terrorism in Britain?
Well, in our current era of terrorism in Britain, which really started in 2017, we can see that the Syrian civil war, as it originally started over a decade ago, really was the seismic event that had a chain reaction which is continuing to this day. Of course, it was the Syrian civil war that originally sparked the creation of ISIS, the territory it held, and then as a result, the calls it made to people to join it and to commit attacks around the world. Since 2017, a large number of the attacks and plots we've seen in this country has been caused directly by ISIS and its activities in Syria. And so now we're waiting to see whether ISIS will be able to seize the opportunity of the fall of Assad and whatever happens next to regain ground and to rebuild its powers.
In your book, you describe a change in the nature of the threat and therefore a change in the tactics to combat the threat since 2017. Do you want to outline what the change has been?
Yeah, I think most people will associate terrorism or terrorist plots with the kind of atrocities we saw maybe 20 years ago. Things like 7/7, things like 9/11, where you had cells of ideologically driven people who networked together, perhaps had training abroad, had a large amount of organisation and a hierarchy where things would be planned for many months or years, and it provided opportunities for the security services to gather intelligence, to get into these networks and to find out what they were doing. Since 2017, and as a result of ISIS's call for people just to commit terror attacks at random, what we're seeing is mainly what used to be called lone wolves. Now they tend to be officially called self-initiated terrorists, and they can attack anywhere, anytime, at very short notice, and they're acting increasingly on a wide range of ideological and personal motivations that are getting really hard to predict.
What kind of people are these typically?
They're typically men. They tend to be fairly young, although we have seen some people into their 50s. And for whatever reason, they tend to have adopted a sort of grievance, a kind of anger against the world. And that anger can take them down numerous paths. It can take them to ISIS and jihadism, or it can take them to neo-Nazism. And actually what we're seeing in the most recent wave of plots is a whole combination of things where people are almost building their own ideologies by taking a mix of kind of hatred for particular groups, things that have gone wrong in their own lives, a hatred of particular institutions, and marrying it all together as a kind of justification for their own personal campaign of violence.
So, for example, we've moved away from the idea that someone committing jihadi terror might typically be someone who is an immigrant or from an immigrant family. Some of these people have no connection with Islam in the early part of their life at all.
Yeah, exactly. And the vast majority of attacks we've seen in recent years in this country and plots have been carried out by British people. And when you look at the statistics of the most recent year of counter-terrorist activity by the police, the vast majority of the people they deal with are both now white and British. And of course, some people can convert to Islam, and we see that sometimes. But actually, jihadism as a kind of share of the threat is now still a very large part, maybe a majority, but much smaller than it used to be. And most people are being self-radicalised through the internet at home within the UK.
In your book, you reveal that many more plots are thwarted than are carried through to success. Does that mean, in your view, that the security forces have adapted fairly well to the changing nature of the threat?
At the moment, it seems so. So the numbers that we're running on roughly, since the Westminster attack in March 2017, we've had 18 attacks in the UK, not all of them deadly, but incidents that have been classified as terror attacks. And we've had at least 43 foiled plots. So the numbers look very good, but there are warning signs, especially recently, where we've had a few near misses where people would have committed deadly attacks were it not for things going wrong by accident. For example, a bomb that didn't properly explode, or someone who was talked down by a random member of the public. So they've definitely got better at anticipating this new wave of kind of self-motivated online people, but there are still people who seem able to slip through.
There are extraordinary examples of success where telephones are bugged, where lethal explosive material is replaced with innocuous material by the security forces without, obviously, the plotters knowing. There are great examples of success.
Yes, and we tend to see that kind of example in the more complex investigations, normally where MI5 are involved. I mean, in the book, there are incredible stories where they went to such lengths as, for example, setting up a fake courier company to hire members of a terrorist cell so that they could access their cars to bug them, or people posing as bomb makers who, like you say, made completely viable-looking fake bombs and suicide vests that would-be terrorists picked up, thinking they were ready for an attack. In fact, they weren't. These operations, and we don't know what's going on now, for example, and what may come out in the future, but it is quite amazing some of the things that the security services have been able to do.
Do you want to say something about the controversy over whether you describe an incident as terror-related or not? The example, obviously, of the little girls who were murdered at the Taylor Swift party. I think nobody has declared that to be a terror-related incident. Would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, exactly. So I think one of the issues is that the police and security services and government have never really come out and explained the considerations that are at work when they make these decisions. And what they have to do is look at the UK's legal definition of terrorism. And the key bit that is providing a lot of controversy now is that for something to be declared terrorism in this country, it has to be committed for the purpose of advancing a specific cause. And when we were looking at Al-Qaeda or ISIS, that's very easy to distinguish. It's very obvious. They make it obvious. But when you have people doing a random act of violence who are not previously known to the security services, unless they have amount of solid evidence that not only did they have a kind of set of beliefs, but they were also doing something for that purpose, they cannot declare it terrorism. And that's where attacks like Southport, and also we had a mass attack in Nottingham and in other places, that's the reason why they weren't declared.
Yeah. So it's not, I mean, some people think that it's sort of, it's politically motivated. It's to try and remove the word terror from some of these terrible crimes. But you think it is generally quite complicated.
Yeah, I've never seen any evidence of a political motivation in these considerations. There is, at the end of the day, it comes down to professional judgment, and there's only a certain amount we see. But I guess I would say that now we're seeing a lot more terrorists with personal, kind of what you'd call vulnerabilities, mental health issues, and that definition is now 24 years old, and it's a harder bar to meet.
Thank you very much indeed, Lizzie Dearden. Your book is called Plotters, the UK Terrorists Who Failed. Thanks for being on GB News. Coming up, the Trump political dynasty is set to return to the White House. Features director at Tatler, Ailey Hargreaves, will be here to explore the Trumps and how they possibly modelled themselves on the Kennedys. This is Sunday with Michael Portillo, only on GB News.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast on the Met Office. Unfortunately, it's a return to the grey and gloomy skies for most of us today. Wettest of the weather will be across parts of Scotland, but for all of us, it will be feeling a good deal milder than it has been of late. So we really start the day rather grey. Best of any brightness really right throughout the day will be across many eastern areas, where the further west you are, greater chance of seeing some rain, especially for parts of Scotland, where this rain will turn increasingly heavy and persistent later on across the northwest. But with the wind coming in from the Atlantic, as I said, a mild feeling day could see highs reaching up to 12 or 13 degrees in a few spots. So we end Sunday afternoon very grey across many parts of England and Wales. There will be still a few glimmers of sunshine, but they'll be very fleeting if they do occur. A risk of some spots of rain across the moors, the mountains of Wales, especially for the Pennines and the mountains of Northern Ireland too. But the main bulk of the rain really will be across parts of western and northwestern Scotland, where it will be heavy and persistent, combined with a strengthening wind. So quite a wet and windy end to Sunday across parts of Scotland. Further south, as we go through the course of the night, remaining fairly quiet. Still a risk of some spots of rain across any high ground, some hill fog too, making it a rather murky night in places. But with the cloud cover and the winds coming in from the west, it's going to be another mild night. Temperatures in most towns and cities holding up into high single figures. As we move into Monday, I'm hopeful we will see a little bit more in the way of brightness. The wind's a bit more stronger, so that hopefully will break up some of the cloud as we go through the course of the day. So some sunshine around, but for the far north of Scotland, this rain band really not going far at all during the course of the day. Warnings are in force. Could see some very heavy rainfall in places. Further south, in the sunshine, feeling mild once again. Could see highs reaching 12 or 13 degrees.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date. Or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there short and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. Donald Trump will be inaugurated on the 20th of January, and also returning to the White House will be his family. Wife Melania and son Barron have been consistently in the spotlight during the past year. Well, with me now is Ailey Hargreaves, who's the feature director at Tatler. It's said then, welcome to GB News, it's said then that the Trumps are modelling themselves on the Kennedys. Easy to say. Is there any proof of that?
Yes, well, you know, this for us at Tatler is so interesting. So much of what we do is about power and status. And there are two questions here, I think. You know, the Trumps were born into a similar privilege, you know, of the Kennedy descendants. But they have also modelled themselves on this family. And Ivana Trump, Donald's first wife, actually was particularly influential in this. While JFK, you know, was assassinated when Trump was a teenager, you know, clearly that image will have been imprinted in his mind. But he had this first wife that had come from, you know, communist Eastern Europe with extreme social ambitions. And they were the talk of the town in 80s New York. They owned the Plaza Hotel, and they were really climbing the ranks of society. And when her children were young, Ivana actually hired a nanny that she claimed had worked for the Kennedys first. She sent her daughter Ivanka to Choate School, which was the JFK alma mater. And Ivanka took on that passion for the Kennedys as well. She named her first child Arabella, which she had planned to name her child Arabella since she was very young, but Arabella was actually the name that Jackie Kennedy used to refer to her stillborn child with JFK. Meanwhile, Jared Kushner's father, Charlie, called himself the Jewish Kennedy. And when they married in 2009, they released one single photograph in the style of Carolyn Bessette Kennedy and JFK Jr. And of course, when the Trumps came into the White House for the first time in the first administration, Ivanka, Jared and Don Jr. were all senior advisors. The Trumps actually found a loophole in a law created 6 years after JFK appointed his own brother as Attorney General, which was an anti-nepotism law, sometimes referred to as the Bobby Kennedy law. So there's a lot of aspiration, a lot of similarities.
And the family is very important to the Trumps. They meet together frequently. They have family rituals. They meet for meals, for example. They are a very close family. And Trump, it seems, Donald Trump, the man who's going to become president of the United States, he puts trust, in particular, in his family. He feels that if they're in the family circle, he doesn't have to doubt their reliability.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, going back to Mary Trump, Donald's mother, who came from the Outer Hebrides over to New York when she was 18, every single Saturday, even when sort of Donald and his generation were growing up, they used to meet at the Trump household in Queens for meatloaf. Every Wednesday, they used to meet in Brooklyn for steak, to go to a steakhouse. So family has always been really important to Donald Trump throughout his various, the various iterations of himself. And he doesn't trust easily at all. And I think it's a mutual deal, right? Trump knows he can trust his children, but equally they know that in sticking with their dad, he's come back from so much. They're always going to win if they stick by his side. And I think it's that mutual deal that actually reinforces that trust. And of course, there is the addition of Melania to this, who is Trump's third wife, and he really, really feels like she has his back. What's interesting is, for this piece, I spoke to Mary Jordan, who's the executive editor of The Washington Post. She spent more time with Melania than any other journalist. But before she was granted the right to interview Melania for the first time, she was told she had to have an interview with Donald Trump himself. They're very protective of each other in that way.
Let's talk about Lara, who's a daughter-in-law. She's married to Eric.
Yes.
So the speculation at the moment, by the way, that she might go into the United States Senate.
Yes.
And this is because Rubio, the president senator, is nominated to be the Secretary of State, therefore there'll be a vacancy. And interestingly, when there's a vacancy, you don't get a by-election. What you get is the governor of the state, who's called DeSantis, and he would simply appoint someone to serve out, I think it's the remaining 2 years in this case.
Yes.
And Lara is mentioned in this context. But one way or another, it looks like Lara, as I say, she's just married into the family, is in a highly trusted position.
Lara is really interesting, and for me, in a political way, whereas Ivana was social, she's kind of similar to Ivana Trump because she has such ambition. She came from North Carolina. She married Eric Trump 10 years ago. And actually, shortly before the wedding, she fell off her horse. She's a horse rider, very fit, and she broke her wrists. And a mark of her toughness that Donald Trump saw and loved was at her wedding. She actually removed her casts, which it was not what she was supposed to do, but she understood the optics. She wanted it to look good. She went through the pain and she did that. Lara Trump is a hustler. At one point she was a Hooters girl. She became a baker. She became a breaking news producer. She's had such an interesting life, and it was going to a Trump rally. She wasn't political before, but when she saw the sort of incredible reception that Donald Trump got at his rallies, she was inspired and she got involved too. And we all know Donald Trump loves to watch TV. He has several screens. And it was watching her talking about him and promoting MAGA really impressed him. She can spin a narrative, she can be that relatable voice. And as we saw when he gave his victory speech, she was right behind him. She was right in that camera frame, and that was Ivanka's place in the last administration. And Ivanka, there's a lot of evidence for this, used to fight for that spot. It's now taken by Lara Trump.
And could you very, very briefly, because we're running out of time, say something about Barron? I think he's 20 years old.
Barron's really interesting. I spoke to a very close friend of the family for 30 years for this piece, and he absolutely says Barron is the underestimated, untested person. He's 18, he's tall, he's handsome, and he helped Donald Trump win the bro vote by telling him to go on podcasts like Joe Rogan and Aidan Ross, and he loves the fact that his dad is president.
Absolutely fantastic. So your piece is in Vogue.
Tatler.
Thank you for correcting me. Your piece is in Tatler, and it's by Ailey Hargreaves. Thanks very much for being on.
Thank you.
During Advent, as we count down to Christmas Day, we're hearing from church ministers across the country. Each day they have a special message for you to celebrate the festive season.
The GB News Advent Calendar, Day 15.
Hi, I'm Richard Ingman, Vicar of Crofton Parish. We often think that faith and doubt can't coexist. If you have faith, surely you have no doubts, right? People of doubt can't have faith. Some of us who doubt, we often kind of feel envious of those who have so much faith. In Matthew chapter 13, we see John the Baptist, the second most important person in the gospel, having doubts. He's a preacher, He's a prophet, he's a true believer, but he's been imprisoned, and in his cell, his certainty is starting to ebb away. Was I right to believe? The truth is, faith and doubt coexist within all of us. Jesus doesn't criticize John for his doubts. He just reminds him of why he believed in the first place. Whatever your doubts, maybe this Christmas is the opportunity for you to remind yourself of what and why you believed in the first place.
You can see all of our special Advent messages as Christmas approaches by visiting gbnews.com/Advent. Merry Christmas to you all. Now, coming up, Stefan Kyriazis will join me to share his favourite theatrical excursions of the week. This is Sunday with Michael Portillo, only on GB News.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Locals in Abingdon in Oxfordshire have signed a petition to keep the name of their local pub, and it's called The Midget. Now, this comes after a university lecturer led an 11-month campaign to change the name of the pub, and the owners, Green King, have caved in. But locals are fighting back, and GB News spoke to one resident, Leanne Thompson, for her thoughts earlier today.
I'm not feeling great about it, to be honest. You know, it's a pub that's been here for a very long time. It's called The Midget after a MG car, and they're changing it to the Roaring Raindrop, which a lot of people are not happy about. We know why they're changing it, but a lady apparently came in who was very upset at the offensive term for the name midget. But nobody here sees it as an offensive term. You don't see the midget and feel any kind of offence towards that. It's named after a car. If she was to actually come, she might actually know more about it, but apparently she's not even been into the pub. She's just heard about it and broadcasted on social media that she wanted the name changed because it's offensive, which as locals don't feel that way. It's the midget. It will always be the midget. And if you look, it's even still on Midget Close. So I don't know if they're going to change it to the Roaring Raindrop Close.
Do you know, you should walk into the Midget now and go, do you serve shorts? And just keep going on the joke. It's named after a car, the MG Midget, that was manufactured in the town of Abingdon for a while. The car was released in 1961. The Boozer was built in 1974, giving huge pride to the area. It wasn't named after midgets, you know, the Snow White and the 7 vertically challenged individuals variety. It's named after a car.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. Christmas is fast approaching. The theatres are packed. Amongst the many theatre-goers this week was Stefan Kyriazis, and he joins me now. Stefan, is it true, by the way, that the theatres are packed?
They are coming up to Christmas, which is wonderful to see, and a big relief. So yeah, it's been a difficult year, but it's now seasonal time, and this is when theatres rely on, you know, panto and everything else, but also ballets with all their nutcrackers and everything. This is when they need the big chunk of money to also help them get through the rest of the year. So yes, Happy to see they're all full. And
you've been to see some Christmassy things?
I have. I've been to see lots of fun stuff. And I know we have a thing where you're constantly trying to lower the tone, Michael, with all your opera and art galleries and I don't know what. So I'm here to save the day.
You're not.
Beat me to it. Oh, yes, I am. And I think if you want to raise the tone, what you really need is Nigel Havers in a skimpy Carmen Miranda outfit with giant balloon bosoms, because, you know, nothing says Christmas quite like that.
Is this Robin Hood?
Obviously, Carmen Miranda, yes, you made the connection. Yeah, this is Robin Hood. This is Julian Clary's annual extravaganza at the London Palladium, and it's fabulous. Huge venue, it fills the space, massive budget. I mean, this has got a budget the equal of any show in the West End. It is truly spectacular. Julian, surprisingly, is Robin Hood, and most of it I can't repeat, but he has his arrow all a-quiver, and he offers his wood to any needy men. So it's you know, it's on that level, and that's the clean stuff. And it's fabulous to see because, you know, there's all this talk of society and tone and what's acceptable and what's not. And as long as it's done in the right way and everybody is in on it, I have never laughed so much. It was truly, truly funny. His costumes are insane. And I noticed some of them that you've obviously lent from your generous wardrobe. So he thanked you, but I can't repeat what he said.
Now, pantomime is meant to operate at two levels, for adults and children.
Yes.
Can that possibly be the case with Julian Clary?
Just about. There were children, not as many as you would normally see in a show, but also there's Paul Zerdin, who won America's Got Talent, a ventriloquist, and a ventriloquist comes on the stage with a puppet and I slightly sag a bit. It just feels so old-fashioned. But he is magnificent, incredible control of the crowd. And then they did bring up I don't know where they found 4 children, but they had 4 children on stage with varying degrees of success. But he worked the children supremely well, got them to sing Old MacDonald Had a Farm, because we also have Jane MacDonald as Maid Marian. So there are bed scenes between her and Julian and Nigel that I think I might be scarred for life. But it's just, yeah, I mean, she'll ask for more flattering lighting. There'll be a blackout. Then she gets thrown in the dungeon by the sheriff of Nottingham. And then Julian remembers a time when he was in Berlin in a different kind of dungeon. And that I can't repeat any of that on television.
Oh, God.
Absolutely jaw-dropping, but the audience goes crazy. Yes, the kids did have fun. But I would say this is refreshingly also thoroughly entertaining for adults. It's absolutely fantastic.
Does it run into the new year?
This one is going until January the 12th at the London Palladium. I cannot recommend it enough, or any local panto, because they're all, every year, original material, original music, original costumes. It's sensational. Please go.
You've had a wonderful time.
I did.
You've also been to see The Producers.
Yes, something else that's very camp and slapstick. So this is Mel Brooks's very classic film, which had Zero Mostel and Gene Wilder, then turned into a Broadway show with Nathan Lane and Matthew Broderick, who then made it a film. And now we've got the musical again in London. It's at the Menier Chocolate Factory, which is a tiny, I mean, it's pretty much smaller than this studio. Small space. And that one's running until March.
Now, this is quite a risky subject.
Yes, it was even at the time. So basically, it's the fantastic idea that a very down-on-his-luck producer, Max Bialystock, is tearing his hair out. His last play has been an absolute flop. And an accountant suggests to him that actually you could make more money with a show that closed on opening night, because you could then keep all the investors' money and not have any more running costs. So they go looking for the worst show in history. And yes, even when it came out in the 60s, controversial, the show they find from a lovely man called Franz, with his humming, singing pigeons that all have swastikas embossed on their backs, is a gorgeous show called Springtime for Hitler. So yeah, from the get-go, you have to absolutely go with it. And obviously, Mel Brooks is Jewish. The producer, again, this time is Jewish. The main actors playing the role are Jewish. So you can work with it.
Did you have a good evening?
Yes, the Meunier is small, and this is normally it's a razzmatazz musical. So what they've done is made it kind of smaller and seedier, which actually suits the background to it all. The 2 leads are fantastic. Andy Nyman I saw in Fiddler on the Roof. He was sensational. And Mark Antolin playing the very nervous accountant is absolutely wonderful as well. Great performances, really inventive use of space. I would imagine there were lots of actual producers buzzing around. I would think we'll probably see a West End transfer for this. But Mel Brooks is an extraordinary composer and lyricist, not just a comic titan. The music is I am annoyingly still humming Springtime for Hitler. And it's got the classic line is...
Must be fairly careful of that, I think. Yeah.
Well, yes, but it ain't no mystery. If it's politics or history, all you got to know is everything is showbiz, which obviously you would know with your razzle-dazzle. These lessons never change. You know, history repeats itself, but also thoroughly entertaining. So huge fun.
Another good show.
Yes.
And now a bit of ballet.
A bit of ballet. So
a nutcracker?
This is a nutcracker. We don't have a nutcracker at the Royal Ballet this year. We've got Cinderella. So this is the English National Ballet, and they've had one running for about 10 or more years that was a very good, solid show because they risked with Gerald Scarfe, and it didn't really work out with all the designs. They were a bit too scary for the kids. Now we have got... This is one of the most sumptuous ballets I've seen, and the English National often is slightly looked down on. The costumes and the sets are spectacular. So, classic story, little girl Clara falls asleep, everything grows around her, and she wakes up in the land of sweets and dreams and all this. They've reinvented so much, so they've got rid of so much of the early party scene, which is all very Victorian and I find very dull. We've got a wonderful sweet shop, then we go outside and we've got kind of Oliver-like urchins with little rats' tails, so everything is kind of hinted at what's to come. The transformations are beautifully done with projections and rats crawling everywhere on everything. And then they've changed so much. So the classic snowflake scene is reinvented. It's a bit Narnia, but it works. It's kind of these icicles, and they've given us an ice queen. All the choreography is new. It's divided the critics. So mainly, and I can see it, the choreography is not your classic Ivanov Petipa, which is from the original Tchaikovsky 1890s production. It's a little bit musical. It's a little bit kind of fun. It's more accessible. So for me, the audience absolutely loved it. Cheering, clapping, whooping. I can see why ballet purists wouldn't be quite as keen. But again, as a family show and a big entertainment...
Yeah. And this would be what the English National Ballet is aiming for.
Absolutely.
And we're talking about at the Colosseum, aren't we?
Yes, at the Colosseum. So, again, to bring ballet to the public. And the final scene, you have to rework things. There's no Russian dance. There's now a Ukrainian dance. The very problematic Chinese characters, they've been cut. But characters come out of sweet boxes and great big licorice all-sorts tins and... amazing costumes. There's these big palladiums and all the characters sit in them while everyone else is dancing. It's gorgeous. There's a flying ice carriage. I know I'm running out of time. Beautiful. So this one is on at the Colosseum until January the 12th. But that's 3 wonderful different shows. Please go to the theatre going into next year. Exciting stuff.
Your enthusiasm, absolutely infectious. Stefan Kyriazis, thank you so much. That concludes the first hour of Sunday with Michael Portillo. Please rejoin me at noon, when my panel will discuss whether the Greek statues from the Parthenon in Athens, which are presently held in the British Museum, should be sent back. I'll be joined by the author Hugo Vickers to explain his fascinating new book on Clarissa, supposedly a niece of Winston Churchill, which reveals newly discovered love letters written by Churchill to the girl's mother. I'll also be speaking to classical pianist Melissa Harrison, who's played for some of the biggest fashion houses in the world. And I'll bring you the latest instalment in my Taste of Britain series. I've got Michelin star chef Jean Delport, and he's going to talk about his culinary journey. So I'll see you very shortly at noon. This is Sunday with Michael Portillo. Thank you, Stephen.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather update provided by the Met Office. Quite a mild theme to our weather over the coming few days, but also a windy one as well. You'll see on the pressure chart there is a lot of isobars here, meaning some very strong winds around, particularly around parts of the North Yorkshire area. The A1M could provide some quite tricky travelling conditions with gusts of up to 65 miles an hour here, and there's a wind warning in force. Also some gales around coastal areas of Scotland also. Quite cloudy for most of us this afternoon with spots of drizzle in the west, the most persistent rain across areas of western Scotland. But you'll see there that mild theme in place for all of us everywhere in double-digit figures, well above where we'd normally expect to be for this time in December. That theme will generally continue as we head into this evening as well. The cloud really remaining intact for the vast majority of us, quite grey skies into the evening period. Again, those odd spots of drizzle out towards the west just to contend with, but the rain really will be very persistent across parts of western Scotland. Over the next 24, 48 hours, we could see widely half a month's worth of rain falling across parts of the Scottish Highlands, perhaps locally up to 150 millimetres of rain. So some travel disruption is certainly possible, and a rain warning comes into force from this evening, running all the way through until midday on Tuesday, with that rain really very persistent and heavy at times. Further strong gusts of winds throughout tonight, with a very squally band that moves its way into parts of Caithness and Sutherland as well. Temperatures, though, again, are going to be on the mild side for many of us, holding up around 9 to 11 degrees Celsius. As we head throughout the rest of Monday, that rain band is still very much in play across areas of Scotland. But elsewhere for Northern Ireland, England and Wales will hopefully start to see the cloud breaking up a bit more and a few more sunny spells developing during that afternoon period to provide a bit of a brighter day overall. Still, though, the odd shower around to contend with. Temperatures reasonably similar to today as well, generally 11 to 12 degrees Celsius. That mild, slightly unsettled theme does continue throughout Tuesday and Wednesday, but a few sunnier spells again emerging into Thursday, our temperatures also dipping. Bye-bye.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright outlook for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's the biggest, greatest Great British giveaway so far, with your chance to win a spectacular £50,000 in tax-free cash. 2025 could be amazing, with plenty of treats, holidays and fun on the horizon. How would you enjoy that cash? £50,000 will make someone our biggest ever winner. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+ and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
down to earth,
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
and most importantly, honest,
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. Jane Austen described Christmas as the season indeed for friendly meetings when everybody invites their friends about them and people think little of even the worst weather. Leave the winds, rain and chill outside. I invite you to another cosy hour of Sunday with Michael Portillo for more discussion on art, culture, ethics and food. Should the curatorial work of Lord Elgin at the beginning of the 19th century now be undone? In other words, should the marble statues that he acquired from the ancient Greek monument, the Parthenon, now be returned to Athens? Would that be natural justice, or should such urgings be dismissed as wokery? My panel will wrestle with the ethical issues. Writer and broadcaster Hugo Vickers will be here. He's unearthed some letters written by Sir Winston Churchill, which were unknown until now, that reveal a secret passion. It was for a woman who would go on to marry his brother Jack, and would be the mother of Clarissa, who eventually was the wife of Churchill's successor as Prime Minister, Sir Anthony Eden. Classical pianist Melissa Harrison will be here to discuss her journey with music ahead of releasing new original pieces inspired by her work with luxury fashion brands. And in the latest instalment of my Taste of Britain series, South African chef Jean Delport will discuss his culinary inspirations and his Michelin-starred restaurant, which is called Interlude. But before all of that, your news headlines with Sam Francis.
Michael, thank you very much indeed. Good afternoon to you. It's just after midday. Well, Labour has claimed a record pace for removing migrants from the UK, but channel crossings are still at an all-time high. The Home Office says nearly 13,500 people have been removed since Labour's election win in July. That is the most in any six-month period since 2019. But the number of channel crossings continues to rise, with over 21,000 arriving by small boat, including a record 609 on Thursday. Home Secretary Yvette Cooper says Labour is intensifying border security and cracking down on illegal working. But Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch told us here on GB News it's Labour, she says, who is failing to control our borders.
I'm not going to run away from the subject of immigration. I never have. Labour are pretending that they're tough on immigration when actually they stopped us from doing quite a lot of things. It wasn't just the fact that we had a majority in the Commons. We did not have a majority in the Lords. So a lot of legislation, the Rwanda legislation, even when we were putting it through, it was getting blocked elsewhere. So I'm not going to have Keir Starmer, who wanted foreign criminals to stay in this country, actively stop them from being deported, pretend that he is Mr. Immigration.
Well, let's just bring you a breaking line. We're hearing from Fiji this afternoon that at least 7 tourists are believed to be fighting for their lives after a suspected mass alcohol poisoning at a luxury resort there. Witnesses have described to local media scenes of terrifying distress, claiming up to 12 people collapsed during that incident. One victim, someone has said, was seen suffering seizures, foaming at the mouth. Also adding that a young girl, perhaps aged just 8, took a sip of her mother's drink and is now reportedly fighting for her life. 4 Australians are believed to be involved, aged 18 to 56, and they have now been rushed to hospital. This latest incident in Fiji comes just weeks after the deaths of 6 other tourists in Laos, also from a suspected alcohol poisoning, with, sadly, that British tourist Simone White, aged 28, among those killed in that incident a few weeks ago. We'll keep across the lines coming to us from Fiji, bring you any more details as they come into us. Well, in other news, an alleged Chinese spy linked to the Duke of York and 2 former Prime Ministers posed a national security risk, a tribunal has ruled. The businessman, known only as H6, was barred from the UK last year after reportedly infiltrating high-profile circles, including attending events with David Cameron and Baroness May. Home Secretary Yvette Cooper says Britain must maintain economic ties with China, but will act strongly against any security threats. Critics, though, including Nigel Farage, are calling for the man to be named, while Ian Duncan-Smith is demanding a full investigation into his activities. The Duke of York, though, insists no sensitive matters were ever discussed and says all contact with him stopped following government advice. An urgent manhunt is now underway for those responsible for a deadly shooting overnight in West London. A woman in her 40s was shot and killed, while 2 men, both in their 30s, were injured, one of them critically. Residents in Brent say they heard 5 gunshots in quick succession, and police have now cordoned off the area with a number of officers still at the scene. Detectives are now working to track down those behind the attack and are urging anyone with information to come forward. In Glasgow, 8 people have been injured after a double-decker bus collided with a railway bridge. Footage shows the vehicle wedged under the bridge on Cook Street with part of its roof ripped off. 1 person is in a critical condition and 5 others were rushed to hospital. Emergency services were called to the scene at around 6 o'clock on Saturday evening, with police launching an immediate investigation. Roads were closed and motorists are still being urged to avoid the area as inquiries continue. And water bills are set to rise by 20% to fix Britain's broken sewage system, adding around £100 to the average household bill over the next 5 years. The Environment Secretary Steve Reed admits that the hikes will anger families, he says, but that they are essential to repair years of neglect and to prevent water rationing within 15 years. The regulator Ofwat is expected to approve those increases this week, with some providers pushing for even steeper rises, some up to 84%. Labour, though, says the extra money will be ring-fenced for fixing pipes and building reservoirs, with any unused funds refunded to customers. New laws are also being introduced to force water bosses to report sewage leaks, with tough penalties for non-compliance. Those are the latest headlines for now. Another roundup from me in about half an hour. Now, though, it's back to Michael.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sam Francis. The marble statues which once decorated the Parthenon, which stands on the Acropolis in Athens, were brought to Britain by Lord Elgin's agents between 1801 and 1812. Possibly those magnificent works of art have survived better, first in his private collection and then in the British Museum, than they would have done in situ. But Greece today is a stable country, a member of NATO and the European Union, and Athens is a centre of scholarly excellence. A striking museum, effectively a replica of the Parthenon built alongside the original, enables visitors to ascend to the level of the missing friezes high up on the ancient building. Should the statues be returned to Greece, would that be a sign of our national weakness? Is this debate another example of a woke agenda? I'm joined now by my panel pollster and director at JL Partners, Scarlett Maguire, chief political correspondent at The Times, Aubrey Allegretti, and journalist and broadcaster Candice Holdsworth. Aubrey, what do you make of this? Should they go back?
Well, it's interesting that Keir Starmer is clearly more open to the idea than Rishi Sunak. I mean, a few months ago, back when Rishi Sunak was Prime Minister, there was this diplomatic row when the Prime Minister suddenly cancelled a meeting with his Greek counterpart. Meanwhile, Keir Starmer has literally been rolling out the red carpet to welcome him into Downing Street. And so I think that probably suggests that there is some latitude there. And the government says that it's up to the British Museum to decide. But, of course, the government brought these artefacts off Lord Elgin when they were, originally transferred to the UK. So clearly the government has a stake in this. And I would suspect that the fear is that there will be some sort of narrative zone, that after the handing over of the Chagos Islands to Mauritius, that there will be a sort of narrative created and a criticism of Keir Starmer that he's handing over sort of British possessions, British land, as it were.
Beautiful analysis, but do you have an opinion?
Not personally, no. But I mean, speaking to politicians, I think they generally see that it's a long-running issue. If we can get it resolved fairly amicably, good. But that's the public's not necessarily keeping the closest eye on this. But I think that the fear is it could create this kind of narrative if it was resolved.
Candice, will you volunteer a view, a personal view?
Yes, yeah. OK, I'm going to be so frustrating and say I can see arguments on either side, because I think this issue is complex. I don't think it necessarily divides into right or left or woke and anti-woke, because I actually know many Conservatives who say give it back, because they respect those values of culture and heritage and national pride. There is, I think it's so true, I think it depends where you fall on the issue. Do you see it as a sign of national weakness, giving them back? I don't think it is, actually. I think if they went back, it would be fine. It wouldn't harm us in any way. I do think, though, being in the British Museum, a lot of people do get to see them, which is nice. I mean, they get global viewing.
Candice, that's quite a serious practical consideration. Obviously, there are many more visitors to London than there are to
Yes.
Athens. London is very much on the path that is pursued by people from all over the globe. Many people from the United States have been to London again and again,
Yes.
but they've never been to Athens. They never will go to Athens. So do you see that as a powerful argument?
I do. I think there was a parliamentary inquiry into whether Elgin had acquired them in a dodgy way, and they said no, he got it, it was perfectly legal. But I do recognise it wasn't the ideal circumstances for the Greeks. I mean, they were occupied by the Ottomans at the time, and things have changed since then. And, they've rebuilt everything, and they're saying... We can see that there's this missing thing, and it's so much a part of us, and it's so important. So, I'm a bit wishy-washy on it, I must say. I wish I had, a strong opinion and I could say either which way. But I think ultimately, whatever decision is made, it won't be a tragedy for Britain.
Well, we have a third opportunity to get a strong opinion. But shall we start with some data first? Scarlett, is there data on what the British public thinks?
Oh, yeah, there is. People think that, broadly speaking, they should be returned. I think the question...
By a decent margin?
By a really decent margin. It's actually gone down slightly since this time last year. You can read into that what you will. I'm not entirely sure what to make of that, in all honesty. But no, broadly speaking, people support it. It's pretty broad across demographics. There's some interesting differences amongst party political opinion. So Conservative voters still think it should be they should be returned. Reform voters feel the other way, but only just. They're still very divided on it. Labour voters and Liberal Democrats feel more strongly they should be returned to Greece. But it's not a very divisive issue, and I think that partly reflects its salience. It's just that it's not something people, I think, most people think about day to day. It's not that important to them. And I think, to come to your second point on them, potentially, I think it's your second point about my opinion on it.
Yes.
I think that matters, actually. So this is so important to the Greeks that I believe it was part of this Prime Minister's manifesto to run again. He said, I'm going to get the Elgin Marbles back. They are hugely culturally significant to Greece. I feel a lot of sympathy to that argument and to why they would feel strongly about their culture and their heritage and wanting it back in their country. I do think, though, the fact that they're just going from one museum to another, albeit very good museums, but British Museum is a phenomenal museum, and it sounds like I've not been, that this one's going to be excellent as well. That raises a different question about what museums are, what they should have. And I am a little bit anxious about the idea that museums should only have artefacts and relics from their own culture and be purely national. I think that would be a great shame and deprive a lot of people from experiencing other cultures and history.
To your point that the Greeks want them back very badly and it's been in their manifesto and so on, do you apply the same argument to the Falklands and Gibraltar?
I think it's always slightly different when you talk about questions of territory, and I do think this is where, as Aubrey was saying, that this is where politically it becomes a little bit more difficult. And I think potentially one of the reasons why Rishi Sunak took against it was because he didn't want to be seen as weak, and he was very aware that a lot of people did see him as weak, especially by then. And I do think it's unfortunate for Keir Starmer that it's come in the aftermath of the Chagos Islands, for example, because I actually don't think these two issues should be conflated, and I think they're incredibly different. But people might and people will, and I think that's when you risk turning it into a culture war issue rather than just a question of culture, and they're very different things.
Let's see whether we can get an opinion out of Aubrey. Do you think there's something in the argument that at least some museums should be universal, and the British Museum is pretty close to being a universal museum? So it has Babylonian culture, it has Greek culture, it has Roman culture, etc., etc., etc. And the fact that you can go to one place and see how these cultures relate to each other is a very important function for a very particular sort of museum. And whatever might be the other claims of Athens, it cannot claim that, or at least not to the same extent.
No, I think that's completely correct. I mean, the British Museum's phenomenal, and it's got sort of artefacts and objects from all across the ages and sort of that have been scattered across the world. So to sort of place it in that context where you're elevating it to a status that it possibly won't have in Greece, I can completely understand why people say that's why it should be there. I think it's difficult, though, when the UK becomes the sort of moral arbiters of, our museum is greater than yours and we're sort of elevating it to this status. And I think the other point I would make is there's some discussion about a loan agreement, and I just think it seems like a non-starter, because when you speak to people, they go, well, if you did that, the Greeks would be very unhappy about giving them back ultimately. And so it's probably best that this issue is settled once and for all somehow, rather than there being a kind of loan agreement where they're sort of in situ and potentially taken to Greece, and then, we're asking for them back later down the line. That spells bigger diplomatic row.
Candice, what about precedent here? Are we going to end up with a lot of empty museums as all the artefacts that we have in Britain drain away to their countries of origin?
I know. Well, I mean, there's maybe some things that we could claim from other museums in other parts of the world. Could we ask the French for the Bayeux tapestry back? We could get some Anglo-Saxon manuscripts back from museums in Italy. Could it set a bad precedent? Maybe. I think, you know, Britain is more open than other countries to these sorts of arguments. I mean, you know, people here will give it a hearing and say, listen, you know, perhaps we should. And like I say, it's something across the political spectrum, unless you are a very engaged person on these culture war issues and you think it's a sign of weakness, though that does seem to be more of a marginal viewpoint.
Well, let's have a sort of yes or no question. By the time of the next general election, will it have been decided to return the marbles to Athens? Yes or no?
Yes.
I think there might just be a lot of stalling.
Probably
no.
Probably no.
Stalling.
Interesting.
My instinct is to say no, but never say never.
I think my answer would be yes. I think it's falling that way. Very interesting, and thank you very much to the panel, Scarlett Maguire, Aubrey Allegretti and Candice Holdsworth. Coming up, right from broadcaster Hugo Vickers will join me to talk about his new book, which has revealed unpublished letters written by Sir Winston Churchill to an object of his passion, just before he married Clementine. This is Sunday with Michael Portillo, only on GB News.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family. Simply go to gbnews.com/your say.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
But it turns out there's a growing number of grandparents who are now taking up the hobby.
And not all of them are male. 7 million gamers are aged over 50, 7 million of them. And we're going to introduce you to one this morning. Her name's Kath Bowie. She's 76 years of age, and Kath has become a worldwide star of the game Fortnite. Good to see you, Kath.
Hello, good morning to both of you.
Morning.
And tell me this, Kath, is Bowie your real name?
Bowie. Yeah.
Bowie.
Yeah, it is my real name, yes.
And you do it a Bowie and not a Bowie?
It's a Bowie, yes, definitely Bowie, yes.
Bowie or Bowie?
Bowie.
Bowie.
But that's not what the Jim Bowie was called, or Jim Bowie was called in the Alamo. He was a Bowie.
No, but that's what I'm called, Kath Bowie.
Oh, right.
She's their own superstar.
You are your own superstar. You are indeed. Well, so we're led to believe, Kath, that there's nobody else like you, or very few people like you, but there is. There is lots of people your age, your stage, doing what you do.
Yes, there's not a lot that streams. Okay, Fortnite, but there's definitely plenty that plays. Any game, you know what I mean? It doesn't have to be Fortnite. It can be any game.
So Kath, how did you get started in all of this?
Oh, yeah, well, it's 7 years ago, actually. I walked into my teenage grandson's bedroom and just saw him playing what I now know, of course, what I play is Fortnite. And that was the very first week that Epic had released it. And it was just really love at first sight.
GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Join me, Nana Okoye, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. A couple of weeks ago, we marked the 150th birthday of Sir Winston Churchill, a statesman who shaped this country and led it through its existential struggle during the Second World War. Hugo Vickers' new book, Clarissa, focuses on the life of Clarissa Eden, the second wife of Churchill's successor in 10 Downing Street, Sir Anthony Eden. Clarissa, before her recent death in 2021, entrusted to Vickers letters between her mother, Lady Gwendolen Bertie, and Sir Winston Churchill. Were they in love? Writer and broadcaster Hugo Vickers joins me now. Hugo, welcome to GB News and congratulations on the book. What is your answer? Do you think Churchill was in love with Gwendolen, who was known as Goonie?
I do. They met in 1907 in the summer at Lady Randolph's house, which was Churchill's mother, and definitely a flirtation began to take place, and letters were exchanged between them. And what was interesting, as you can imagine, is I had to work out, was this a love letter from Winston? Well, Winston Churchill's love letters were, of course, all about himself, as you can imagine. They're very much in tune with the sort of things that he used to write to Pamela Plowden, who was the first girl that he really wanted to marry. And what was so interesting was that he then goes, I mean, they definitely, there's a very strong bond between them. And I mean, at one point he's going to go to France and she says, oh, I wish I could come to Paris with you. I'm not suggesting that there was anything particularly strange about that, but she does say that. And then off he goes on what he became his African journey. And he's still writing letters to her in the same vein. Meanwhile, she is writing to say, I'm going to marry your brother Jack. And of course, the letters cross, as you can imagine. It took a long time. So there comes this awful moment when he's in Uganda, when he gets the letter, and of course he writes back and says, Jack's a wonderful person, you'll be my sister-in-law, how exciting. And then, of course, takes a slightly, Jack's a sort of difficult character, etc., etc. You can imagine the sort of thing that he said. Then, of course, in August 1908, he stands as best man to his brother, and 2 or 3 days later, he proposes to Clementine. So you can make of that what you will.
Yeah, it is very, very interesting. So Goonie marries Jack, and Goonie has Clarissa, a daughter. Now, was Clarissa a Churchill?
No, she wasn't a Churchill, but then nor was Jack, apparently. This all gets very complicated, but Jack was a Boscawen. Lady Randolph had lots of affairs. But actually, Goonie had an affair with a man called Harold Baker, known as Bluey or Bluetooth Baker, highly intelligent, brilliant man who was warden of Winchester College. And it's from that she got her very particular intelligence. And a slight, to be honest, slight sort of disdain for the Churchill family.
You knew Clarissa very well. You knew her over many years, and she entrusted you with the letters that we've been talking about. Did she entrust you to write up her life as well? Was that understood?
That's an interesting question. What she said in a letter in 1994 was, I leave it entirely up to you what you choose to publish. So in that respect, I think yes. And I think she bequeathed me all her papers and the copyrights in her writing. And if you do that to a biographer who is also a friend, don't you think that you're rather expecting that possibly they might write your life one day? I mean, she was a very close friend for over 40 years, and we had many very fascinating conversations, and I traveled with her at certain times, and she was fascinating. So, yes, I don't have any qualms about that.
No. This question may almost be painful since you were very good friends, but I'm not sure from your book that I got an impression that she was very likeable. Was she likeable?
Well, I wonder whether she would ever have claimed to be likeable or made any effort to be likeable. She was extremely acerbic, she was a very loyal friend if you were her friends, and she selected her friends extremely carefully. So I was very flattered that for some reason she chose me at a certain point. It was after Anthony Eden had died, and she was making a lot of new friends. I can't explain why, but I know it worked. I think I amused her. I know I amused her, and we had good times together. But, you know, as I say, she was very acerbic, and her diaries and her letters are absolutely fascinating, the things that she wrote about people. And just to give you one example, in Patmos, 1983, her way of leaving a dinner party was to say to me, "I think we've exhausted the social possibilities of this meal, don't you?"
Well, nearly every comment that you report from her has a certain acidity, a certain sharpness. The book is much more notable for her put-downs than for her compliments. That's certainly the case. By the way, before she marries Eden, she has a number of lovers, and I learned from your book that we mean lovers in the modern sense of the word. In other words, men that she went to bed with. I was quite struck by how clear she was about this, about her experiences, how her diary betrayed exactly what her movements were, where she was spending various nights and so on. But, maybe I had misunderstood this period. I was struck by how plain that became in your book.
I think probably all these things have always gone on. It's just a question as to how openly. And of course, at the time, she wasn't particularly open about it. I mean, she had this long affair with Raimund von Hofmannsthal, and that was people in that world knew about it. Some people knew about it, but a lot of people didn't. And his wife evidently didn't know about it. I mean, that was quite a big issue. And that went on for 9 years and was very important to her, and explains why such a beautiful and highly intelligent and highly sought after girl, well connected, hadn't married until she was 32. And then she marries Eden, and it becomes very fascinating. To begin with, she's horrified by what she's done, but then when he becomes ill with his bile duct operation, they bond incredibly, and they had a very, very good marriage. It was a very strong and very, you know, a close love between them, which is wonderful.
A criticism that was made of her when she was the Prime Minister's wife, when Eden was in office, was that she interfered too much. She was present at meetings that maybe should have been thought to be government confidential, that she gave opinions, that she egged her husband on and sought to contradict decisions that had already been made. What do you make of those criticisms?
Yes, they were certainly made. And my feeling is that she was probably actually more intelligent, cleverer than Anthony Eden in the long run, but she was very keen to support him over Suez. Her line was not that he was ill and that's why it all went wrong, but that he, in a sense, he misunderstood the role of Britain in the 1950s. You know, we'd sort of won the war, but we hadn't won it without help. But he thought that they could, you know, sort out Suez and it would all be fine. Another interesting fact, of course, in all this is that Macmillan very much misled Eden. Now, you could say Eden could have talked to Eisenhower direct. They knew each other perfectly well, but he relied to some extent on his foreign secretary. And the result was, of course, that Eden fell. And guess who took over? Macmillan. So she wasn't a great fan of his. And when in a few years later, in 1963, he fell over the perfumer affair and other things. She wrote this amazing letter, which ends, "I couldn't have wished for a more squalid exit for a man I've always distrusted and disliked."
Yes, another great put down. Very briefly, Hugo, what use did Clarissa make of her long period of widowhood after Eden had died?
Well, when she was married to him, she didn't really go to the opera and the theatre and things. They liked Shakespeare, so they just set him out that. But a lot of things she put aside. The moment that he died, she travelled the world. She took up deep-sea diving. She returned to going to the opera and all the sort of things that she really liked. As I say, she adopted a whole lot of rather fascinating new friends and used her time extremely well. I mean, to see as much of the world as possible. She read voraciously. She was extremely well informed. She had a slight dilemma about being Prime Minister's widow and this sort of bohemian side of life, but it seemed to balance out.
Well, Hugo Vickers, thank you very much for coming on the programme. Congratulations on your book. It's a very good read, and congratulations on your exclusive about the letters between Winston Churchill and Clarissa's mother, known as Goonie. Coming up, pianist Melissa Harrison will join me to talk about how she's combining the genre of pop and classical music as she's set to release new material. But first, your latest news headlines with Sam Francis.
Very good afternoon to you. It is exactly 12:30. Well, the top story from the newsroom this afternoon. Labour has claimed a record pace for removing migrants from the UK, but channel crossings are still at an all-time high. The Home Office says nearly 13,500 people have been removed since Labour's election win in July. That is the most in any six-month period since 2019. However, the number of channel crossings continues to rise, with now over 21,000 people arriving by small boat, including a record of 609 on Thursday alone. Home Secretary Yvette Cooper says Labour is intensifying border security and cracking down on illegal working. But the leader of the Conservative Party, Kemi Badenoch, says it's Labour who are failing to control our borders.
I'm not going to run away from the subject of immigration. I never have. Labour are pretending that they're tough on immigration when actually they stopped us from doing quite a lot of things. It wasn't just the fact that we had a majority in the Commons. We did not have a majority in the Lords. So a lot of legislation, the Rwanda legislation, even when we were putting it through, it was getting blocked elsewhere. So I'm not going to have Keir Starmer, who wanted foreign criminals to stay in this country, actively stop them from being deported, pretend that he is Mr. Immigration.
Reform UK says it is ready to name and shame an alleged Chinese spy linked to Prince Andrew, defying a court order to keep his identity secret. Nigel Farage and senior MPs are urging his name to be revealed in Parliament, calling it a matter of public interest. The businessman known as H6 was banned from the UK in 2023 after being deemed a national security threat by the then Home Secretary Suella Braverman. It's claimed H6 met former Prime Ministers David Cameron and Theresa May and kept photos of their meetings in his London office. The Duke of York, though, says he cut ties with the individual after government concerns were raised. At least 7 tourists in Fiji are in a critical condition after a suspected mass alcohol poisoning at a luxury resort there. Witnesses have described scenes as terrifying, claiming up to 12 people collapsed. One victim was seen suffering seizures and foaming at the mouth, while a young girl who took a sip of her mother's drink is reportedly fighting for her life. 4 Australians aged 18 to 56 are among those who've been rushed to hospital. While this latest incident comes just weeks after the deaths of 6 other tourists in Laos, also from a suspected alcohol poisoning, with British tourist Simone White among those killed. And an urgent manhunt is underway in London for those responsible for a deadly shooting in the northwest of the capital on Saturday night. A woman in her 40s was shot and killed, while 2 men, both in their 30s, were injured, one of them critically. Residents in Brent say they heard 5 gunshots in quick succession, and police have now cordoned off the area with a number of officers still at the scene. Detectives are now working to track down those behind the attack and are urging anyone with information to come forward. Those are the latest headlines for now. A full roundup at 1 o'clock, and Michael will be back with you after this short break.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather update provided by the Met Office. Quite a mild theme to our weather over the coming few days, but also a windy one as well. You'll see on the pressure chart there is a lot of isobars here, meaning some very strong winds around, particularly around parts of the North Yorkshire area. The A1M could provide some quite tricky travelling conditions with gusts of up to 65 miles an hour here, and there's a wind warning in force. Also some gales around coastal areas of Scotland also. Quite cloudy for most of us this afternoon with spots of drizzle in the west, the most persistent rain across areas of western Scotland. But you'll see there that mild theme in place for all of us everywhere in double-digit figures, well above where we'd normally expect to be for this time in December. That theme will generally continue as we head into this evening as well. The cloud really remaining intact for the vast majority of us. Quite grey skies into the evening period. Again, those odd spots of drizzle out towards the west just to contend with, but the rain really will be very persistent across parts of western Scotland. Over the next 24, 48 hours, we could see widely half a month's worth of rain falling across parts of the Scottish Highlands, perhaps locally up to 150 millimetres of rain. So some travel disruption is certainly possible, and a rain warning comes into force from this evening, running all the way through until midday on Tuesday, with that rain really very persistent and heavy at times. Further strong gusts of winds throughout tonight, with a very squally band that moves its way into parts of Caithness and Sutherland as well. Temperatures, though, again, are going to be on the mild side for many of us, holding up around 9 to 11 degrees Celsius. As we head throughout the rest of Monday, that rain band is still very much in play across areas of Scotland. But elsewhere for Northern Ireland, England and Wales will hopefully start to see the cloud breaking up a bit more and a few more sunny spells developing during that afternoon period to provide a bit of a brighter day overall. Still, though, the odd shower around to contend with. Temperatures reasonably similar to today as well, generally 11 to 12 degrees Celsius. That mild, slightly unsettled theme does continue throughout Tuesday and Wednesday, but a few sunnier spells again emerging into Thursday, our temperatures also dipping. Bye-bye.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. Melissa Harrison is a classical pianist who's performed for some of the biggest luxury fashion brands, including Bulgari and Harrods. She's now set to release new music influenced by the pop genre and tied to her love of fashion. Going to leave all that out. Let's take a listen to Melissa playing for Bulgari now. Melissa is here. Welcome, Melissa. Very good to see you. So there we see you playing for a fashion brand. You were playing a sort of standard there, but it's led you, I think, to develop your own blend of music. Is that right?
Absolutely. I think as a classical crossover artist, I've always been inspired by both, classical and modern music, especially by Hans Zimmer, Ludovico Einaudi. They're my main inspirations, who I really look up to, definitely.
So when did you start playing classical music? As a small child?
I started the music journey when I was 5. I started my classical training when I was around 6 or 7, and I kind of found my own niche and my own style as I progressed. So, but I really stick strong to my classical roots, absolutely.
So did you get a lot of public performance of classical music?
I did. I did a lot of festivals, concerts, competitions. I worked with different orchestras as well. So I had that whole classical upbringing, and now I'm kind of doing my own style, which is beautiful.
Indeed. Was it an option for you? Was it an option that you considered to continue to be a classical performer, a classical pianist?
Absolutely. I think I had, the opportunity to, work with an orchestra and to create more classical-driven albums and things. But I think from my own personal reasons, I wanted to do something different, and I wanted to break the stereotypes of classical music and be something in the fashion space, particularly.
So tell me about this connection with which I'm unfamiliar between music and fashion. How are the two brought together and why?
Well, I think obviously they're both expressive art forms, and I think, you know, because I've worked with so many jewellery brands from like Bulgari to almost Paget, I feel like music and fashion has a beautiful synergy in the way that they communicate. They're both emotional. They're both, obviously, they give the glam wow factor as well. So it's been such a privilege to create music in that luxury space. But like any art form, whether it's music, fashion, dance, art, they complement each other beautifully, and it's good to be part of that.
And the luxury space, the brand, was beginning to influence your music.
Absolutely. When I started doing things with Bulgari jewellery, I think that was the moment when I realised this is a space that I want to grow in and a space that I really enjoy, bring my unique energy to. Absolutely.
And were the brands supportive of that? Were they looking for you to play music that people knew that was familiar to them, or were they interested in your creating something new for them?
I think in the beginning they wanted something really popular that resonated with everyone or that was on trend at the time. But I started to show them my original pieces and compositions, and they quite liked it. And we started doing some collaborations a lot more from then.
So tell me, at sort of what point on the spectrum is your music? If classical is over here and rock is over here, you know, where are you?
I feel like I don't like to put my music into a box or a category. I'm very like genre fluid. But if I had to choose, I would say it's like right bang in the middle between like popular pieces from like chart music, from Billie Eilish, Adele, but also music by Hans Zimmer and classical artists.
So we've got a little clip of you playing a piece which is called Eclipse Couture, and I believe that's a new piece.
It is.
So would this typify your new work? Is this where you are now?
This is my most recent composition, yes.
Let's hear Eclipse Couture.
Thank you.
Congratulations on that.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
And this is part of an album?
Yes, I'm working on an album inspired by fashion. So particularly Eclipse Couture, I was working with a really close friend of mine. She's a fashion designer, Amora Amani. So she creates like very glam couture gowns. So the album is inspired by, couture fashion and luxury experiences. So the whole album is going to be based on different fashion brands, different influences, and it's going to be like a very experimental album. Yeah.
What is the role of the album today? I mean, presumably the album doesn't sell directly now. It's all about streaming, is it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, obviously it's connecting online with your audience and streaming on Spotify. It's doing live videos and things. But I feel like obviously technology has moved such a far way. So I always live stream my videos when I work with like almost Portillo or Chanel.
And you've been able to monetize that. You've been able to earn from that. I mean, a lot of people complain they get very little from streaming on Spotify, but you found a way of monetizing it.
I feel like, for me, as an artist, my main sort of capital comes from working with brand collaborations. That's where my main line of work is. Original music is something, obviously, you have to get, you know, a certain amount of streams, but most of the time, brand collaborations and being in that space, really, that's like my bread and butter.
Is it a very tough life being a musician?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, honestly, as an artist, I feel like, you know, it's a very spiritual journey. And I feel like if you have good people around you that inspire you, you know, you're obviously going to, like, succeed. And I've got so many, like, close friends in my circle who inspire me on a daily basis and, like, keep me well. They come to my gigs, they do my makeup for me, like, all that kind of stuff. So I'm really, really blessed to have people like that in my life.
Great. And how often do you do gigs?
I only do probably like one big performance a month. It's usually with a brand or it's usually like a concert. But most of the time I'm practicing at home and choosing like all my glam outfits.
So tell me how people could follow you. What's the website?
So you can follow me on Instagram at Melissa Harrison Pianist. That's my main socials. I'm also on Spotify as well. But yeah, come give me some love, and I'll be playing all your favourite classics and chart hits towards Christmas. I'm sure I'll be doing plenty of Christmas classics on that one.
Melissa Harrison is the name to remember. Thank you very much indeed, Melissa.
Thanks.
Coming up in the latest instalment of my Taste of Britain series, I'll be joined by Michelin star chef Jean Delport to discuss the inspiration behind his restaurant Interlude, which is in the Grade 1 listed 240-acre Leonardsley Lakes and Gardens near Horsham in Sussex. This is Michael Portillo, only on GB News.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's a time for the vegan community to get together, as well as an opportunity for non-vegans to try going plant-based.
Well, joining us now is from her delicious hummus, and we both love hummus, this is a great thing. This is the founder of Chickpea, Hannah McCollum. Hannah, lovely to meet you. And you've brought in some of your beautiful products in front of you here, so can you talk us through some of them?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a range of chilled hummus, and then latest to the range of a new ambient snack pot, which is a fridgeless hummus that doesn't require refrigeration. But I started Chickpea because of my love for hummus, but also sustainability and reducing food waste and encouraging people to be more plant-based without saying go vegan.
Does normal, say, traditional hummus have anything that's not vegan appropriate in it?
Not really.
No,
I think
it's always chickpeas, olive oil, maybe some other bits.
Yeah, lemon juice, aquafibre or water to help with consistency, garlic, and rapeseed oil or olive oil.
And there's a bit of a misconception about veganism that I hear a lot, where people say, look, I'm not a vegan, I love my steaks, I'll just get out of there now. But there's a misconception that you don't get the protein, you don't get the fats, and you're kind of just eating processed salads and, fake meat and things. But that's not quite the case, especially with chickpeas, right?
Yeah, I think protein is really important, and actually a lot of people think I need a certain amount of fish every week or meat, but actually a lot of the fish and meat that you're eating are eating higher protein foods, so algae, seaweed, pulses, all these types of plant-based foods. For me, veganism is like you could have a delicious rye seeded bread with just loads of roasted vegetables, seeds, tahini sauce on top.
That sounds
and there's nothing beige in there at all.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+ and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. My next guest is originally from South Africa, an experience which he says shaped his culinary career. Jean Delport has been awarded a Michelin star and a Michelin Green Star at his restaurant with rooms, which is called Interlude in West Sussex. The menu maintains a close tie to the natural world, offering a taste of nature's changing seasons. And Jean Delport joins me now. Jean, you're very welcome indeed. It's great to see you.
Thank you for having me.
So, you originated in South Africa, and interestingly, there are not many South Africans who have won Michelin stars, but you're one of them.
Yeah, I think it's just a handful of us now scattered around Europe. But yeah, it's one of those things that we strive for as much as we can as a chef.
Tell me about Interlude. It seems to be set in an enormous park, and is it set in an old house as well?
Yeah, so we're a 240-acre estate, wild woodland gardens, and then we have an old manor house which we've revamped up, and we've got the restaurant with rooms within that.
And part of what you do is you forage.
Yeah, we do. So obviously I look at the whole estate as our backyard pantry, really. So we try and utilise as much as we can from the gardens and the estate on the menu throughout the whole year.
And what sort of things can you forage from your estate?
Well, we're quite lucky. We've got plants and trees and things like that from across the whole world that have been planted there over the last 200 years. So we've got quite a wide range, not just naturally occurring stuff. So anything from the normal wild garlic, we go up to the birch trees and things like that. And we've also got imported fruits like dogwoods and things like that. We've got orchards, bees, hens with chickens and things like that. So, yeah, we've got a wide variety to play with.
And have you engaged in planting? Are there things that you particularly want to grow there?
Yeah, we've looked at naturalising the area again, so kind of reintroducing things that would naturally occur. Apples, for instance, from the area specifically bred from that or curated for that specific site, and just looking back in history and just trying to bring back bits that have gone missing over time.
And how would you describe your cuisine? Is it a mixture of things?
Yeah, it's a slight eclectic mix. It's very French, traditional Old English cooking at its base form, but I bring lots of South African bits, a lot of my tradition, a lot of my heritage, and a lot of memories growing up, and we intertwine that quite delicately with the gardens across a whole tasting.
Give me examples of what you brought from your South African heritage.
Well, we'll take things from vet cook that I've grown up on, like a traditional deep-fried cake, which we have with us today, puddings like malva pudding, wine side of things. We try and integrate as much as we can, memories-wise, as well as taste-wise, and where it also makes sense, you know, so we can have some fun.
There's some wine here. Would this... Leonard's Lee, that's the name of the estate.
Yes.
And this is a Sussex Blanc de Blanc sparkling wine.
Yeah, so that's 100% Chardonnay, and that's from our estate that we launched this year. We've been quite excited, so we planted the vineyards back in 2017 already, and this year was the first time we were able to release. It's something quite special, and something that we're really, really proud of, and I think having something on our back door that I can use with the restaurant is just, it's like a match made in heaven for us, really.
Well, and everyone's saying now that England is the heavenly place to grow sparkling wines. Let's have a taste of this. Happy Christmas to you,
Cheers.
by the way.
Same for you.
Heavens, that is delightful. So quite sharp, good acidity there.
Yeah.
Not very sweet at all.
No.
Very, very nice balance. You've also brought some things to eat by the look of it.
Yeah, so I thought something that would pair really, really well with the wine itself. So again, a little bit of a take on what we do at the restaurant. So we've got a bit of poached lobster, a very French traditional way of starting off with fresh elderflower jelly on top.
This is poached lobster?
Yes.
Well. Sorry, I ought to lift it in a beautiful wooden bowl. Here we go.
I would like to dress it for you before you eat it, if you could. So we've got some fresh elderflower on there with some foraged wild sea greens. And then I'm going to put on there a cauliflower cream that we make, and I infuse that with last season's elderflowers that we preserve. So obviously the whole thing of the restaurant is preserving as much as we can in the summer months, and then using it on the menu throughout the year. And then I'm going to finish that off for you with a little bit of caviar, English producing from Exmoor.
No. That looks absolutely marvellous.
One of my favourite caviars at the moment, and I think it pairs really, really well with the wine. So I'm going to balance that on top of there for you, if we can.
Look at that. What a gorgeous thing you've created there. And what a riot of flavours are going to be. Thank you very much.
No worries. And then on the side of that, for you, we've brought a vet cook, a traditional South African deep-fried cake, very similar to a donut. We traditionally either eat that sweet or savoury, and today we've gone very savoury, so I've got some cured pork lardo and some crispy pork skin. And I'd normally encourage everyone to kind of eat that alongside the stuff to feel a little bit of texture and a little taste of my home.
Your lobster and caviar is absolutely superb. Now this then is something that I will never have eaten before. Who eats this in South Africa?
I mean, it's countrywide. It's kind of, so it was more like a cake. So I think if you bite into it, probably a bit easier. Okay. But yeah, I think it's well known very much in all communities. It's quite an easy thing to make. It's a dough, very basic dough that gets deep fried. We've just elevated it a little bit in the restaurant and just kind of refined it a bit more.
Slight touch of donut to it, but it's absolutely exquisite.
Yeah.
Well done. So, was it difficult to get your Michelin star?
Yeah, it's not an easy road. I think it's a road that's made over 10, 15 years to 20 years rather than just a quick thing. I've always had quite high standards, so I kind of pushed towards that. But yeah, I think when your passion lies within it, it comes across quite easy, and then just work towards something always.
And the Green Star, what does that mean?
Yeah, so that was something we were quite proud of. It's all about sustainability and kind of really pushing the whole estate and the restaurant forward, and just looking at every detail and making sure that we're looking after ourselves, the restaurants, the estate itself, and just kind of looking into any kind of thing that we can think of, really.
Very good. And you're going to be busy over Christmas?
Yeah, always. Christmas time always goes crazy, so it's always a bit of fun as well, so it's good.
And Interlude is actually a restaurant with rooms, so people can stay there too?
Yes, yeah, we've got 10 lovely rooms, bespoke rooms upstairs, and we really encourage people to come and have dinner, stay over, and just really spoil themselves.
No need for drinking and driving. No. Thank you very much, Jean-Dale Paul from Interlude. And thanks to all my guests who joined me on Sunday with Mike Portillo this week. Just remains for me to wish you a happy Christmas, because I won't be here next week, but please view my special programme on Christmas Day at 7 in the evening. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, very good afternoon to you. This is your latest GB News weather update provided by the Met Office. Rain and wind in the story for some of us over the next few days. Quite blustery for many of us. On the pressure chart, you can see quite a lot of isobars on there, really packing together to produce some strong gusts around at times. The rain, though, really courtesy of this cold front that's slipping into northern areas of Scotland. It will turn quite persistent and heavy at times over western areas, particularly the Highlands, over the next 24-48 hours. A bit drier further towards the south, but still quite cloudy throughout this evening, and overnight the odd spot of drizzle still to contend with around some hillier sites. Underneath that cloud, though, it is going to be a mild night for most of us. Temperatures holding up around 9 to 11 degrees Celsius as we start off Monday morning. In that rain band in the north, though, really is going to be very persistent. Locally, we could see up to 150 millimetres of rain across parts of western Scotland. That certainly is possible to provide some disruption in places, and a rain warning is enforced, so do take care here over the next couple of days or so. Hopefully, though, for parts of Northern Ireland and then eventually into England and Wales as well, we'll start to see the cloud breaking up a touch more throughout the rest of Monday, and that will provide more in the way of those brighter, sunnier spells to develop compared to what we are seeing over the course of Sunday, which is quite cloudy conditions. Still locally gusty in places, particularly around some coastal districts. Temperatures, though, with those winds coming in from a southwesterly direction, they are still going to be on the mild side. So temperatures for many of us still in double-digit figures, topping up at around 12 or 11 degrees Celsius, notably above where we'd normally expect to be for this time of year in December. And to sun, Monday evening will feature a very similar picture. Again, a few clear spells across more southern districts, but that rain will still remain very much in place across parts of northern Scotland, totting up those rainfall totals even further. Another area of low pressure moves in across parts of Tuesday and Wednesday, holding on to the mild theme, but the temperatures will start to drop off quite noticeably from Thursday. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.
We'll see a cold snap, which will quickly develop into a warm front. Boxed Boiler Repairs, sponsors of weather on GB News.